The three-armed scale. Throughout history, various iterations of justice systems were set up after the committing of all the worst crimes to conquer and colonize land while controlling the flow of commerce.
They're standing there asking for it.
Keep quiet, soldier. Mark your targets before you fire!
After the dust settles from ideological genocides and wars fought by strong and barbaric men for control, their actions get justified in history by weaker men who set up the systems or polis in the aftermath of land grabs and wars. Ultimately, the foundation laid by murder, robbery and rape provides a platform for civilization to begin on the back of the primitive barbarity. In formula, you seize power with soldiers and strength and maintain it with politicians, policy and finesse. So the once criminals make and enforce their new laws on the land and its inhabitants as they don't want what they perpetuated done to them. This formula brings into being the ironic chain reaction that is, order precedes chaos and laws precede crimes. Where wrongdoing is concerned, revenge and justice become interchangeable and sometimes synonymous in some instances. But the ethical problem is lawmakers never abide by the laws as they would have to provide remedy to the people they originally imposed the system on in the beginning. Outside of commentary on the origins of the justice system, the ever-shifting subjectivity of morality permits man to live in accordance with his own interpretation of justice, thus allowing for honourable and dishonourable pursuits of his ideals. Justice, as a character and an idea, doesn't play fair. In a land where all men have two hands, justice has three. Your side, my side and the truth. Even in the absence or interchanging of the two sides, truth should still remain. So in order to maintain the balance of the scale that represents the justice system, you have to operate from outside of the concept to hold the scale and establish one rule and one order, which means killing off all other versions of justice or numbers in this instance until there is only one. But by the constant suppression of all the other numbers, you inadvertently arrive at a two-party system, two entities vying for the control of justice as number one. Each time you cut down number two, another party takes its place. But what does any of this have to do with Afro Samurai, you ask? This system is exactly what Afro's father was trying to protect him from, but unintentionally played right into, the game of obtaining and maintaining power. Whether for good or bad intentions, this cycle is what separates fathers from sons and men from gods.
Damn it. All these damn headbands do is make dead buddies and orphans. You hear me, Afro? Dead buddies and orphans.
Sins of the father. Faced with the reality of his father's unjust beheading by justice, young Afro is launched into a world of childhood trauma, the likes that follows him from the tail all the way back to the head of the Ouroboros, PTSD. The quietness of Afro shows his experience of the world takes place mostly inside of his mind, with few words to spare across the entire series. Sadness has left him with the bitter taste of seriousness from a young age. The trauma he experienced shapes not only his future, but his psychological formatting and identity as a child. His outlook on life becomes one of a battle-hardened Ronin as he is now mentally fragmented from the trauma and alienated from a normal childhood away from bloodshed and death. After cheating with his third arm to kill Afro's father, Justice hands the number 2 headband to Afro and goads him into taking up the same path of destruction his father, Justice and all before them have walked for revenge and power. Afro is orphaned on a spot and left to fend for himself, where he will be relentlessly pursued and attacked for the number 2 headband. 1, because he doesn't understand what he's actually carrying, and 2, simply because he is his father's son. Half dying from neglect and starvation, Afro wanders the land as a child with the rotten head of his dad inside of a bag. At this point it's not clear what his intentions are, however the carrying of his father's head represents his mourning and the metaphysical reality of DNA. Aside from the anime meta-narrative of headbands and gods, carrying the head of your father is symbolically what you do until you become your own man. Your education, ideals, living circumstances all come from what has been poured into you as a child, but the day comes where you yourself represent the head of your father's lineage. With the preloaded DNA of a master swordsman and a future headband holder, all that is left is for circumstances to trigger the chain of events that will cement Afro's destiny as a number 1 headband holder.
Hey, there's someone I want you to meet. This is Afro. Afro, this is Sio, my sister.
Oh, hi Afro.
Oh, hi.
He's a newcomer at the sword school, but he's real good. Almost as good as me. He's like a brother.
Brother?
Uh-huh.
So, I guess that makes you my brother too.
Yeah, I guess.
The ties that divide. Like all wars, the casualties are not only the soldiers but their innocent families. The everlasting conflicts leave countless orphans in their wake, some only living as survivors and others living as tools for men who will manipulate them back into the cycle as child soldiers and fully grown warriors. Afro is taken in by a swordsmaster who plays father to a group of orphan children. He becomes fond of the group and begins to learn about friendship and how to fight from them and the master. He builds his first bonds outside of his connection with his father and his destiny, but he quickly learns the reality of his path. Although the group of kids are bonded by the ties of all being orphans under this master, Afro's unique circumstances constantly ask him if he will be willing to cut these ties to continue on the path that justice has put him on. As he begins fighting and killing grown men in his pursuit of the headbands, the bloody path laid before him endangers not only him but his newfound family by living among them. Afro goes through a good number of ordeals with the group and even picks up some more emotional baggage with the loss of a close friend. Eventually, even the master is willing to kill young Afro, both for his own selfish desire and the possibility of setting Afro on a different path. But Afro cuts him down, leaving his bonds severed and his patchwork family orphaned again. This duel between him and the master represents the arc of apprenticeship coming to an end, bringing Afro a rung closer to his goal in a twisted game of snakes and ladders. By him going against the pleading of his siblings not to fight, he perpetuates the cycle that brought his own origin story into existence for his fostered siblings. The bloody path that he leaves behind him isn't much different to the one that justice left for him. We get to see these estranged siblings resurface in the future but as enemies, and we learn that not all relationships are good for you. Although it built his character as a child to make friends, it also further drove that stake of emotional fragmentation deeper into his psyche by abandoning them for his destiny.
Okiku. Are you there?
Yes.
What is the matter, disciple Okiku?
Nothing. Everything will be taken care of.
Yes, hello, Brother 2 here.
The honey trap. Aligned with the long-standing practice of systematically destroying young men's futures, we enter Afro's own Samson arc. The use of women and coitus as a weapon has been a tool in the bag of tactics of political, subversive and military groups for thousands of years. We've witnessed in our own lifetime many powerful people taken down by scandals using sirens or controlled and manipulated and blackmailed via that tool. The basic needs and nature of a human doesn't change, and the same primal urges affect everyone from fool to intellectual. Along Afro's journey, he has been attacked by all manner of tactics, groups and individuals on the way to his goal, each time cutting his way through the endless hordes of desires, power lust and revenge. Eventually, he crosses path with an organisation that finances the countless hits placed on him, the Empty Seven, a warped religious cult. Although there are only 6 physical members, the monks' characters almost embody the 7 deadly sins. Narrowly surviving an ambush by a member, Afro is found and taken in by a woman called Utsuru in a half-dead vegetative state. Utsuru is actually one of the orphans from Afro's childhood, now a fully grown agent of the Seven. Her job is to siphon Afro's memories and dreams to find the key to his power, then use it against him. In femme fatale fashion, assassinate him when he is vulnerable. Unaware of her ulterior motive, Afro becomes entangled in her trap as she nurses him back to health. With his memories and data stolen in his sleep, all that's left is to assassinate him. The data stolen represents the history of a man, his identity, what makes him tick, and through the use of coitus, his DNA. A psychological assassination of a man is to make him vulnerable and weak by creating doubt and confusion and ultimately break him through the twisting of his emotions. Before a physical attack takes place, the honey trap accomplishes the psychological manipulation and plants the seeds that destroy men before they can reach their full potential. Now vulnerable, the Seven send a weak assassin to make sure Utsuru finishes the job, but through her own psychological hang-ups and guilt, she fails to commit to the plan and ends up a casualty of her own plot. Although she doesn't manage to kill him, his data was successfully stolen to copy his style and create a new enemy that will mirror him.
Now I have been blessed with a vision. It has led me to design a weapon more deadly than even the Afro demon himself.
there can only be one. Making his way up the mountain in physical and metaphysical fashion, Afro must face a swarm of enemies in a game of death style setup. Like in Zelda, when Link faced off against his shadow self, so must Afro. But this time, the shadow clone comes in the form of a robot built to physically match the technique capabilities of Afro using the data that was stolen from him. The recycled and retold idea of facing off against yourself pops up in many foundational pieces of work and art, from psychology and theology to modern storytelling mediums like games and anime. There are many different ways you could look at this metaphor. In truth, the summary is that each individual must overcome their own shortcomings, be it psychologically or physically, to become their ideal self. Some choose to personify this idea as an internal struggle, with the psyche separated into light and dark or good and evil. In self-analysis, they seek to consolidate this split of natures using psychology like H.U.N.T to incorporate the shadow self. Others see this as a duality between physical and spiritual, or idealism versus materialism, in a battle to depart from carnal pleasures and strive for enlightenment. But unlike the symbolic yin-yang interplay of Ninja and Afro, Afro versus the robot represents truth against falsehood, flesh against metal. At one point in the fight, Afro doubts his own capabilities against his foe, partly because of his fear to confront himself, and partly because of the mirrored immense power and technique he possesses. In and outside of the battle, there is a sub-narrative of man versus machine at play against the backdrop of Okazaki's world. The Afro Samurai universe is comprised of futuristic and ancient elements, playing on traditionalism and modernism. Technology is present throughout the world, but it is still operating like an antiquated feudal Japan. We see this power struggle between traditional and modern symbolised in the very first fight scene between Afro Senior and Justice, sword against guns, time versus the ever-changing landscape of warfare where humans evolve as masters of destruction.
You have the basic skills, but your eyes give you away. Become unpredictable. Strike from your subconscious mind. Let your moves flow out from your individual essence.
So a robot capable of swordplay, accompanied by high-tech destructive weaponry, embodies the exact universe that Okazaki has set up. The almost impossible feat of battling against artillery with swords is achieved multiple times by Afro throughout the show. This highlights the prioritization of elevating traditional human capabilities above modernification and tech. Afro comes out on top against the android-style robot by surpassing his capabilities and ascending his skill to godly heights. When analysed, the true triumph appears when you overcome and outgrow the older version of yourself. The older version of Afro, which the robot is based on, is unable to ascend and evolve like the flesh original, thus sealing its mimicking fate.
Now what the hell is this? Do we really gotta keep going? I mean, this shit you leave behind you is nasty!
Do as you please.
Jesus, you crazy, man.
Two sides of a coin. Under the pressure of constant attacks and isolation via Afro's unique circumstances, we see that psychological state driven deeper into his psyche to the point of separating his already fractured mind into two personalities. The protagonist Afro, the child chasing justice, and the deuteragonist Ninja, the physical manifestation of Afro's repressed emotions, self-commentary and loneliness.
Yo, Afro, ain't you gonna say nothing? I'm talking to you.
The character Ninja is a sometimes ethereal apparition and other times physical being that appears and disappears frequently. In the manga, Ninja is also one of the two guardians of the world and headbands, but the focus in the anime is on how Afro and Ninja mirror each other during their interactions. While Afro is stoic and steadfast in his conviction, Ninja represents the other side of his mind that voices doubts and fears which Afro must quiet. In history, both the samurai and ninja existed side by side, both playing their respective roles in feudal Japan, one working in the light for lord and land, and the other working in the shadow for clan and country. The seriousness and rigid honour of the samurai's discipline doesn't allow for assassination and infiltration tactics used by ninjas. Although they can coexist like cats and dogs in the same habitat, their natures are ultimately different and how they arrive at their goals vary. The ninja represents a flexible, elastic mind able to contort itself stealthily through obstacles in sometimes playfully acrobatic manners. The seriousness of Afro doesn't allow his playful nature to take form physically, thus Ninja Ninja provides the comic relief of his thoughts manifested. This Tyler Durden-esque split personality is born through Afro's trauma and isolation. Afro's subconscious mind looks out for him in the form of Ninja. After all, who would be able to communicate with a travelling target outside of himself? Naturally, there would be some kind of effect from a constantly hunted lifestyle, and that effect comes in the form of Ninja. But with every imaginary friend, the day comes when you have to say goodbye. This departure comes about by Ninja being cut down after several warnings against Afro's ambitions to fight Gino. The metaphorical two horses pulling in different directions finally trot in unison after being reined in by the reappearance of Gino. Gino is the childhood friend of Afro thought to be dead, and the same one who cuts down Ninja. Subjectively speaking, you could say Gino brings closure to the situation that brought Ninja into existence, although but for a fleeting moment, Afro's friend is back. But his return opens up a new can of worms, further pressurizing the already unstable Afro. With a refined calmness reaffirming his resolve to fight against his once friend, Afro overcomes a part of his trauma and breaks through a mental barrier. Although Ninja appears as if he is dying after being struck, the last thing he does is a type of ninjutsu that whisks him into the wind. So even though he voices his departure from Afro, it doesn't mean he is no more, it just means his job is done for now, leaving only one.
The world is lost. All is chaos and pain. It's time for someone to take control. It's time for a man to use absolute power for the cause of ultimate peace. It's time for a man to rid the world of conflict and allow all men and women, young and old, to live in tranquility. It is time for man to become God where God has failed.
The true face of justice. Afro's John Wickian existence finally maroons him before a Truman Show painting of his own. After cutting through thousands of humans, although in self-defense and self-preservation, the weight of blood spilled bears unspokenly heavy on his soul. Battlefield after battlefield soil saturated with blood and entrails. With the empty Seven almost devoid of members and out of assassins to send his way, Afro's ascent up the mountain to justice and the #1 headband can proceed uninterrupted.
What took you so long, kid? I got tired of waiting, so I was just thinking of calling and leaving you a voicemail.
He had played the role set out for him by his predecessors, pursuing revenge and power, and played it excellently. At any time he could have chosen to walk a different road, laid down his sword and the headband, but he refused. With truth playing the ballast of the seesawing scales, #1 and #2 were about to meet. Now, the game, manga and anime all vary in the telling of this saga, but for the purpose of following the timeline in the anime, we'll focus on the interaction between Afro and Justice there. Among the bones of the fallen warriors, we see the various numbered headbands counting down to the final two spread out across the room. This room doesn't exist in the natural earth of the show, it's almost a realm unto itself, only entered through a portal forged by the path walked by #1 and #2. There is speculation that this room only exists inside of Afro's mind, but it's not confirmed, only implied. It's in this superposition space that Justice operates from, not only as a character, but as an idea. Afro finds a warped, dried and dehydrated being sat at the end of a room in a throne-like chair. That being is the aged and now dead Justice that murdered his father. Justice's goal was to become a god, and inadvertently Afro was both his apostle and adversary. Each battle he endured was like a prayer to the one who sent him off on his journey. Each drop of blood he spilled was like libation poured. The tiny thread pulled from fate's tapestry at the beginning of the show is finally beginning to unspool. You can now imagine the twisted irony of what revenge gets you, the chaos that begets order, the crime that requires justice, a never-ending self-consuming cycle personified by the Ouroboros, one replaced by two, two replaced by three, until the end of time. The barbarous foundation of justice is still playing its masterful symphony, the third element that begun it all still pulling the strings from outside of the room. The corpse of justice begins to reanimate from the energy of anger and hate, with his body metaphorically rehydrating from all the blood spilled to reach him. It's at this point the viewer is forced to ask himself if Afro's road was truly justifiable, and if so, was not Justice's. He killed one man, Afro killed many to get to him. All of this happening because Afro is seeking justice, ironically. The cycle perpetuated to quench his own self-righteousness with an eye for an eye. All the metaphysical elements of the encounter aside, the showdown begins.
Is that it? And I thought you loved your pappy. I thought all those souls you sent to heaven behind you mattered. But only now you see. Your little anger is just a sea spray of blood in the endless ocean of this world's killing. It's got no end and no beginning. Just the strong and the dead. Only cursed ones like you and I can stomach this truth.
Final observations. What is the outcome for a man treated unjustly by the justice system? Similar to the question asked in Equality versus Equity, Reality of Psychopaths video, who judges the judge? Who patches the oversights and the abuses of power? If fairness is not possible, what is second best? If Afro is truly to fight against justice, he must remove himself from under the two-armed system and become a third party to his own experience. Yeah, mind-boggling.
Killing some little kid is normally against my principles, but when you cut my pal's brother, you entered the world of killing, boy. Before I kill you, remember this. If you're gonna swing a sword, you better be ready to get cut by one too.
So, just like the foundation of civilization, he will have to seize his metaphorical land in the form of comeuppance against justice, install his polis and version of justice system with the strength of an army that takes the land and the finesse of a politician to maintain its possession. But as Afro is just an individual under the rules of the two headband system, he can either fight or walk away, or force a third choice and destroy the whole headband system. But what then will take its place? The water will flood everywhere when the dam is broken, and in the world that Okazaki has created, the headband system is the dam that keeps the power from flooding the world.
Like your daddy, you're soft on the inside. He couldn't handle all the blood on his hands from the constant headband wars. He actually wanted to just hide the #1 band, conceal that legend from the world. But all he did was stir up a hornet's nest of lust for power. People just kept killing each other. Death raged on. Those headbands can make a man crazy. Not a single loser who put that dumbass #2 cloth on his head reached the #1. They just kept dying over each other.
In conclusion, from the outside looking in, the metaphorical history of the two headbands represents a much larger commentary on our own reality. The unignorable fact is the power struggle has always been between two bad guys playing cops and robbers in the name of justice. Thank you for making it to the end of the video. QR code on the screen, feel free to donate, and don't forget you can click here to check out our latest videos. Until next time, let's hunt.